terms of the actual observation.
The next day, I got a call from someone with the scientific study group or the CIA. I'm not sure who it was the first time. And they wanted to know, they had some questions about the incident. And I had said, I don't know what you're talking about. You probably want to call the Admiral. A few minutes later, the Admiral calls down and says, I set up a briefing tomorrow morning at 9 or 10 o'clock, what it was. In the round room, bring all the stuff you have, bring everybody up there, and give them whatever they want.
So that's interesting enough. In the aftermath of that, there was an FAA, a Federal Aviation Administration meeting, where they're discussing this. They've got all the radar data. In this meeting, and this is now according to one of the men who attended, his name is John Callahan, and he was an FAA senior official with the Federal Aviation Administration. And so what happened, according to Callahan's very vivid, explicit testimony, was that at one point these two men in dark suits enter the room. No one knows where they're from. Is it assumed that they're from CIA? I don't think that's ever made clear where these guys are from. But they come in and they confiscate all of the data, and they are warning everyone, you are never, ever, ever going to talk about this ever again. We're taking all of your evidence. So Callahan kept his copy. That was the thing. He didn't give it up. He didn't let them know. They didn't ask. I don't think they asked him directly for it. And he just kind of slid below the radar, as it were, in this meeting and left it with his copy of the radar data. And it was about 13 years later, I think, in the late 90s, where he is interviewed by Stephen Greer of the Disclosure Project at that time and told his story. And so what you've got here is another incident of very clear, this is not a paranormal Men in Black experience by any means. These are government guys. These are spooks who are confiscating the evidence. Now, who are they? Are they CIA? Are they NSA? Are they something else? Are they from the Majestic 12 or whatever, comparable organization there would be to Majestic 12? Maybe it's called Zodiac. That's a big possibility. But they're from a group that their job was to take that UFO data. And Callahan is really worth listening to. He's a very upfront, extremely candid, very articulate, very smart man. And he's got the credibility and the background to back up what he said. That's the thing that makes him so compelling.
When they read the reports that come through, the FAA has to protect themselves, so you can't say you saw a target, even though this is what he said. So they made him change his report to position symbols, which makes it sound like it wasn't really a target. Well, if it's not a target, then a lot of the other position symbols that we're separating from aren't targets either. And when I read that, I thought, there's something fishy here, that somebody's worried about something rather than they're trying to cover up.
Who do the Men in Black work for? CIA? The FBI? The NSA? Something else entirely? Even in the military, the Men in Black are a mystery. Over the years, encounters with Men in Black have decreased as their legend has grown, even into pop culture. No longer are you interrogated and threatened by a government spook or a nameless agent from an unknown cabal of organizations. As proxies continue debunking and smearing credible witnesses, the Men in Black have evolved their technique to control the narrative through misinformation. Literally, fake news. Take Richard Doty, former special agent of the Air Force who was tasked with infiltrating the UFO community to instill doubt and misinformation of UFO encounters.
The Men in Black have always been present in the UFO community since back in the 50s and 60s. And if the sighting or report of a sighting or acquisition of photographs were important to the government, the MIB, the Men in Black, would show up trying to obtain what information these witnesses had regarding the sighting or the acquisition of photographs. If they took some photographs, the MIB would show up and try to get those photographs. Ever since the 50s, people started seeing flying objects, reporting flying objects. Depending on the accuracy and the credibility of the people that observed these objects. And depending on what the government knew about what those sightings were, it would have depended on whether the government went out and got the information or tried to quiet the people, the witnesses that saw it. But it's happened. It's real. It's a controversial subject matter both within the public and within the government. But my knowledge is I've actually been involved in the Men in Black, in that we didn't call them Men in Black, but they were people within a certain agency within the government, the Air Force Special Activities Center. They're the ones that control these Men in Black. There was a unit stationed at Fort Belvedere, Virginia, that dealt with obtaining information from witnesses. But the controversy, of course, centers around how these Men in Black, or number one, who they were, number two, how they obtained the information for witnesses, and number three, where that information went after the Men in Black got the information. Now, these Men in Black, as you call them, that are prominent within the UFO community, they have a mission. They're assigned to an intelligence unit. They're given a mission to go out and interview these witnesses that saw this, or that have already reported a sighting or collection of data, pictures, so forth, evidence. And so they're out there on a mission. Now, how they operate that from that point on is really up to them. How are they going to get that information? If you're the witness, and we've tried officially, where two Air Force officers come to you in uniform, not a Men in Black, but in uniform, come to you and say, we're from the United States Air Force, and I understand you have pictures of something that you saw last week, and we would like to see them because we think that those pictures could be of a classified project. So we would like you to show them to us. Well, if you say, they're my pictures, I took them, I don't have anything to the military, you don't have no jurisdiction over me, no, bye. And so the Air Force officers leave, and the next day or 2 days or 3 days later, you're visited by two other men. I'm U.S. government credentials, and you took pictures of a classified aircraft yesterday or whenever, and we need to look at those pictures. And you only have one way of doing this. You have to turn them over to us, or we're going to go to the court of law or some other threat. So those are the type of operations that I've seen, I've been involved with. Whether they eventually turn it over, if they don't, there's other means that they can use. But there's other ways. Surreptitious entry into your home. You come home one night from the movies or going out for dinner, and you come home and you find your house to be perfectly the way that you left it, except that where those pictures were stored, the pictures are gone. Or the opposite will happen. You'll come home, the window will be broken, we had a burglar, and they stole this, they stole my television, they stole this, and they also stole those pictures. Now it looks like a burglar. So you call the local police and you tell the local police, and the local police are going to say, well, so you had pictures taken, there's nothing we can do about that.
Jody, my girlfriend, woke up frequently seeing tall, black figures in the room looking down on her. Other times it would be simple mysteries, such as coming home to an apartment that had obviously been tampered with.
Paul Benowitz was a successful entrepreneur and scientist who lived in Albuquerque, New Mexico. There, he unintentionally stumbled into radio transmissions from a secret military base just beyond the border of his city. Later, this base would become known as Dulce Base. Benowitz was then contacted and influenced by Richard Doty. Little did he know he would become a victim of a mass misinformation campaign that would end in tragedy.
Now, there is one person who has called himself a man in black, who's very well known in the UFO community, and that is Richard Doty. Now, Richard Doty was a member of the Air Force Office of Special Investigation, AFOSI. That's like the Air Force's, like their version of the CIA, you could say, their intelligence agency. Part of his job was to protect U.S. Air Force technology, secrets, and things like this. And one of the things that the Air Force would do to protect those secrets is, like there's one instance that I know Doty has talked about in which there was a crash of a secret experimental aircraft, and witnesses actually had photographed it, and you have a situation of AFOSI going to meet with these witnesses, or this witness, and to say, look, this is a UFO, or let them believe it was a UFO and confiscate the images, rather than let them know, yeah, you actually photographed something that we're building that we don't want anyone else to know about.
Don't you think it's a UFO? Do you ever see a craft operated like that? You just have to put that idea in their minds. And I go back to the Paul Benowitz case, which I was involved with. Paul was already a believer. And what he was doing is he was taking pictures of the U.S. Air Force highly classified drone projects. The project was highly classified. I went to Paul, and Paul was already a believer. He was already a member of MUFON. So it was very easy for me. I said, what do you think it is, Paul? He said, I think it's a UFO. I think it's alien craft. I said, you know what? Could very well be. That's all I had to say. And Paul ran with it and believed it, and the rest is history.
You can believe this or not. At least some of those things that witnesses photographed were not ours, and they were not Russian. So there were instances, according to him, at least is my understanding, in which there were objects that were not from here, but they wanted that information as well. Now, again, is this true or not? Who knows?
We were able to, and this isn't classified anymore, one of the things that Paul Benowitz had also kind of stumbled into by recording signals was our ability to shoot a laser at a ground-based laser station up into space, and as the Soviet satellite came over, that laser would hit the lens and blind the satellite while it's going over a certain base, preventing that satellite to take pictures of a base. Now, there was a satellite base at Kirtland Air Force Base and one out at Groom Lake. It was actually two out at Groom Lake, one at their different locations. And that's when every time a Soviet satellite would come over, they'd shoot that laser up and blind it so they wouldn't be able to take a picture of what was on the ground.
But here's what we know about Mr. Benowitz. He was a very smart, capable defense contractor. He lived in Albuquerque, right by Kirtland Air Force Base, by the Manzano weapons storage facility, which is very important. And his office was right across from there. And he witnessed things that he believed were very strange. We're talking 1979, 1980. And Benowitz was a real patriot. And he contacted the Air Force. He said, look, I'm recording things over there that these are like UFOs. And he openly told them. I think we're talking November 1980. And this is when Doty gets alerted to this, and he is sent along with other individuals. Doty's not the only one. They go to visit Benowitz to find out, like, what does this guy have? And the reality, apparently, is that Doty and Benowitz became genuine friends. I mean, probably his job was to befriend Benowitz, but I do think that they actually ended up liking each other. But Doty was working Benowitz, and his job absolutely was to protect any secrets that the folks over at Kirtland needed him to protect. That was his job. So, according to how Doty has often told this story, and I think this part we can say is true, Benowitz was a very, very strong UFO believer to start with. And even before he was seeing things over by Kirtland, he was involved in at least one, let's call it an investigation of a cattle mutilation incident and abduction relating to a woman named Myrna Hansen, who went through hypnotic regression I believe, in fact, by Dr. Leo Sprinkle, who's a very well-known individual in this. And Benowitz was there, and Myrna Hansen was regressed, and she gave a very detailed account of being taken to an underground facility. It's like very heavy-duty stuff. So Benowitz was deeply involved in all of this. Then he sees so he sees things, and he's recording emissions that he believes are like a form of alien communication. So with that, Doty and his team go to talk to Benowitz. And did Doty explicitly give Benowitz false information, or did he show Benowitz things and let Benowitz draw his own conclusions? I think definitely the latter happened, and maybe some of the former happened also. For example, there was one story where Doty took Benowitz to Dulce, New Mexico. Now, Dulce has a legitimate history of bizarre cattle mutilations and UFO activity. I've been there myself, and in fact, I spoke to members of the Gomez family in Dulce some years ago. This is a family that lost, I think, over 50 head of cattle to mutilations during that period of time. There's reason to think that it might be beyond human, and there's reason to think that there were definitely human intelligence operators there as well. There's a lot of strange things that happened over at Dulce. So, and over at Dulce, you've got Mount Archuleta and Archuleta Peak. Yeah, I think that's it. So there's these two large structures there, and there have long been rumors of underground facilities there, and in fact, I think that there probably were underground facilities there. I recall distinctly speaking to Edmundo Gomez many years ago. He's the son of the senior Gomez at the time, and Edmundo told me, he said, look, in the early 70s, we could hear all kinds of construction sounds coming out of there, and we all believed, he said, that there was some kind of construction going on at Dulce. That's his opinion. In any case, Doty, at one point, takes Benowitz either on a helicopter or aircraft, I can't remember which, and they fly around Archuleta Peak. And Benowitz draws the conclusion that there is an underground base there. And I think this is how Greg Bishop wrote about this in his study of this called Project Beta, that there were like these fake artifacts put up by the Air Force to make Benowitz think that there was all of this activity going on, and make him think there was a big UFO thing happening there. And also to lead him away from his fixation on Kirtland, to get him to look at Dulce. That was part of this, at least according to Bishop's research.
Roger, we copy. We're moving in forward. Penniston never talked about any of that taking place until after he went under hypnosis, and that's when it came out that he had sodium pentothal used on him, and he was interrogated. But he told them what happened and wrote it down, and they came back and gave him a statement on what he was going to give to the chain of command.
On December 26, 1980, Great Britain's most notorious UFO incident occurred at a United States Air Force base in Rendlesham Forest. Security personnel Jim Penniston, John Burroughs, and Edward Cabansag were alerted by radio that a UFO was seen moving in the forest on the perimeter of the base. They made their way out to the edge of the forest, and as they made their way in, eventually they stood right in front of something they could only describe as being from out of this world. This small triangular metallic craft had strange symbols etched into its surface. It emanated a vibrant glow that lit up the canopy of the forest, and it was almost soundless. It is said that the craft took off in an instant from the forest floor as if it disappeared into the night sky before them. These three eyewitnesses made their way back to the base by car, where many other observers of the UFO were stationed. As they arrived, they were surprised to have men in civilian clothing waiting for them. And to quote John Burroughs, "There were gentlemen there with sunglasses who took Jim and Ed off somewhere. We no longer saw them after we traded in our weapons, and I felt betrayed because they wouldn't talk to me anymore. What was said to them to clam them up so tight? I have no idea. This story follows an age-old pattern of a prominent Men in Black cover-up. A UFO incident occurs. Experiencers witness something that shouldn't exist in our conventionally understood reality. A meeting then follows between these experiencers and the Men in Black, which strikes fear in them to never speak about what they saw or experienced.
We've got to get to it. We've got to get to it. We've got to know what it wants. Two people that were involved identified Green as being there, and Doty also said that Green came in. There was 3 teams that came in, CIA, OSI, and NSA, that came in involved right after this happened.
I served in the United States Air Force for 6 years, from 1992 to 1998. First 3 years were at Elmendorf Air Force Base in Alaska, and the other 3 years were at Fort George G. Meade in Maryland, the home of NSA. Now, my role for NSA was as a computer technician, primarily systems and network administration for a specific surveillance group. I cannot get into specifics of what exactly we were surveilling, but essentially I offered computer support for those that were performing this function. Of course, I had a top secret clearance, a TSS SCI clearance specifically, and that is very compartmentalized. Now, on occasion, we did have a need to exit the NSA campus and go to an off-site location. And there are a plethora of these types of locations across the country. And these locations were basically hidden in plain sight. You know, they would be at, just small, maybe strip malls that were, out of the way. So they just had some local businesses, some different offices, that sort of thing. And when we would have to go to these locations, we could not arrive in our military attire. They did not want it to be known that this was actually a government operation and the military was involved. So we are required as protocol to dress in black suits and a tie to go to these locations.
And I've got actually an email from one of the OSI agents that was involved that confirmed all this. It's telling us to come to it. We can feel it. I personally was never have a memory of having that happen to me. Now, there's other people that were there that have talked to me and said they saw me come up, they saw me go into the same place they were involved with and everything else. But my personal recollection, which I have a lot of missing parts, the fact is that different people remember being interrogated. I just don't. And I don't know if they were able to block it all out of my mind, or I don't know. And I've never tried to sell that. The only thing I ever did was that I went out there a second time, and that's when I disappeared for a while.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Was that an MIB experience? Black helicopters, military abductions that happen. Sometimes people are taken and they talk about then being visited by, military personnel and debriefed about their abduction.
So Dan Aykroyd, the actor, the comedian, has a very interesting story about Men in Black as well. And it's funny, I have my own little oblique connection to this, very, very small. But in 2002, Dan Aykroyd had a TV show called Out There. And it was a UFO show. Dan Aykroyd, of course, everyone knows Dan Aykroyd is very interested in UFOs. He's very knowledgeable. He knows this field. He's very sophisticated with it. And he wanted to do a serious treatment of the UFO subject. And in fact, this is 2002, and I was one of the new guys in the field at that time, and I had actually myself gotten communication from his team, and they were interested in interviewing me for this show. So I was excited. I thought, wow, this is awesome. Maybe I'll get to meet Dan Aykroyd, And then I discovered, no, the show fell through, no more, and I won't get my opportunity. So what's interesting is that the day that show was canceled has a very interesting story. So according to what Aykroyd said, he's out taking a break, having a smoke outside, and there's a very unsettling man in black who's at some distance, but I don't think that far, who's staring at him. It's unsettling to Aykroyd. The man is dressed in black. He's got a car, a black car. He looks away and then looks over, and the man and the car are gone. Apparently in such a way that it didn't make sense to him, that it just disappeared in such a way. Right after that, he's back inside. He gets a phone call from his producer, who tells him, without an explanation, by the way, that the show's been canceled, no more shooting, it's over. End of story. Big mystery.
So it was, oh, hi, Brittany, sure. Oh, of course, I'd love to. Guy gives me a dirty look. Oh, well, sure. Car gone. That's what happened. And then 2 hours later, we were told we were not to continue taping, and the show was canceled, and none of them would air. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Was that an MIB experience?
So there's a very interesting, let's say creepy video that is available of two apparent men in black. And this has to do with an event that took place at Niagara Falls. Now, I don't know the date of this. The video itself was posted to YouTube in 2013, and it's very interesting. So what you have is a situation where a hotel employee at Niagara Falls, the night before, apparently had shot a very impressive video of a vivid and I think large UFO over Niagara Falls. The very next day called in sick. And on that day that he had called in sick, there are these very two odd men, very intimidating looking men. And all of this is caught on the hotel security camera. And it's interesting because you see all the hotel traffic, people coming in and out of the hotel. And then you see these two fairly large men in these big black trench coats with hats. And at least one of the people there is like obviously intimidated by them and walks away. You can see that in the video. So they go in. And furthermore, when you see, at least to my view, one of them walked in a very odd way. Like his feet were not positioned the way that you would normally see. If you look carefully, like his feet are positioned in an odd way. In any case, what's interesting about the video is you have one person primarily, but there's two people in this video talking. But these are the hotel employees, and they're describing what happened in this encounter. And essentially, they come in and they're looking for this employee who's not there. And they scare the hell out of this one woman who's working there. She gets to deal with these two giant men in these big black trench coats with these enormous blue eyes that never blink, according to her. And they're scaring her to death, asking for this guy. And she actually just broke down crying during the encounter, apparently. According to the person telling the story, who's another employee, a coworker of hers. They wanted this film. They wanted this video. And they, what's very interesting is that you've got this recording on a hotel security camera. And the only, what's going on here? It's either a massive hoax that the entire hotel staff wanted to participate in and create this thing. All right, I suppose that's a possibility. Or it's true, or it really happened the way that it seems to happen. And I don't know what to say about it. I don't know the names of any of the people, and have they been interviewed subsequently? Do we have names? What happened to the employee? What happened to the film that he shot, the video? There's a lot of unanswered questions in this story. Like, we just have to acknowledge that. On the other hand, when you look at this, you listen to it, look, I just have to say, it sounds potentially believable. And I have to leave it at that. I don't know what my full determination is on this for all time, but I certainly will admit it catches my imagination. It really makes me wonder if it actually did happen.
And he said they were wearing black suits, black trench coats. They were wearing like the old-fashioned Federo hats. They had extremely, extremely pale skin. And he said they came in and they asked for you. And I said, I'm sorry, he's actually not working today. And it seemed like they didn't believe me. So they started to walk around the hotel. And shortly after, they went to the tour desk. But he goes, they freaked me out. And I really wanted to tell you that there were these weird guys in here looking for you.
UFO encounters have been mired in suppression, skepticism, and covert tactics termed the truth embargo. This truth has now been considered credible and worth investigating by the Department of Defense. A recent news release indicates the military is again funding research to the UAP, otherwise known as the UFO phenomenon. If there is a long history of information suppression quite evident, then should we trust the newfound interest in the UFO phenomenon by the US government? Should witnesses and experiencers be the ones in which we look to for information regarding this reality? Perhaps the government should be the safe place to consider relevant information on the topic. If that is the case, then the US government will have to regain the public trust and undo decades of the truth embargo enacted by the men in black. The government would have to admit to the said suppression of information in the past, provide reparations for those targeted by the men in black, release all the credible documentation that has been scrutinized by the US Department of Defense over the past 70 years, and finally, provide a clear explanation for how this should affect everyone's belief system going forward. We are not alone. The real question is, will the powers that be ever stop using men in black tactics to control the narrative?